right. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be going over Kubernetes or K8s, labels and deployments. So Kubernetes is an orchestration platform for scaling containerized applications. Handles tasks like load balancing, rolling updates, monitoring, and recovery, all crucial for maintaining a resilient and scalable system. You're going to learn Kubernetes architecture and commands and install Minikube and get K8's cluster up and running on your machine. We'll also learn how to, I think you guys did that yesterday, got your Minikube set up and installed. If you are having issues with that though, we can head out to a breakout room and get you up and going. I know sometimes there's some issues depending on what kind of architecture you're using on your computer or different stuff for that. But yeah, we'll get you sorted out if they're not all up and going yet. Cool. Yeah, so we're gonna learn how to interact with basic Kubernetes command line tools. And also write a little bit of configuration for spinning up pods and deployments and see how labels and selectors kind of fall into that realm. Cool. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Can I get a volunteer to, oh, that's only like 2 sentences, so I guess I'll just do it. Labels and selectors are fundamental concepts in Kubernetes that allow you to organize, identify, interact with resources within your cluster in a flexible and efficient manner. So everyone should be familiar with labels on like AWS resources by now. So labels in Kubernetes act as like the same thing. You're just kind of marking it to kind of do whatever you want with them, organize or just fetch it. Just have a basic label on it. So key concepts. Labels are key value pairs attached to Kubernetes resources. All Kubernetes resources are also in YAML file structures. So that's a good thing to know. They're used to identify and organize resources based on specific characteristics or attributes. Selectors are expressions that allow you to query resources based on their labels. So pretty much the command that lets you get, like, I don't know, say if you have a label on a pod or a node, it allows you to query said pod or node or whatever kind of resource by its label. So selector is like a get, and a label is just like an identifier. Nothing too crazy yet. So defining labels. Labels are defined as key value pairs in a YAML file and are associated with Kubernetes resources through metadata. The key and value can be any alphanumeric string, and multiple labels can be attached to a single resource. So this is the most basic kind of pod.yaml file. As you can see, the kind is pod. It's not node, it's not deployment, it's just pod. Yeah, so yeah, this is just structure. So you got your API version up here, just version 1. You're specifying what kind of resource it is, which is a pod. We'll get into other different types of resources a little bit later. But for this, we're just going to go over pod. Did Julius go over what the difference is between like a pod, a node, like a container yesterday?
Doesn't a pod contain several containers?
A pod does, yeah. A pod can
Yes.
run multiple containers, and a node can run multiple pods.
Okay.
Yeah. There goes like cluster, node, pod, container. In that kind of order. Cool. Yeah, so within a YAML file structure, you're gonna have a metadata. And you could just have a bunch of cool stuff in there. Mostly like your name, or in this case, labels. And then here's your key value pair of app and then web, right? You're having a web app. And you could also specify an environment. That's just not a requirement or anything. Well, I think the name is a requirement. However, a label is not a requirement. Neither is an environment on a label, but we're just going to set it to production. And then your spec file will contain all your good stuff for what's actually going to be inside the pod. And so for this, we're just running a single container. We're going to call it my container, and the image is just going to be the latest image for the Nginx image. And then we're going to be doing it on port 80. So any questions about this file structure or this YAML file for Kubernetes? just for a pod, anyhow.
Are
Cool.
there, Reno, are there certain, I don't know what to call them, like if you put something in an app, right? Would it not work? Are there certain words or certain image? I don't know if they're images or what they are that go with the certain tags. Does that make sense? Like, is there a bank online of what goes with what?
I believe you can really put anything in here um, as metadata. However, you could always like a good idea is always to refer back to like Kubernetes documentation and like Kubernetes like K8s is widely known. It's also open source, so there's loads of documentation on it. But yeah, you can really put whatever, but labels is kind of like a key word that's known. And so you're able to like query on it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, cool. Any other questions? Great, cool. So can you guys see my terminal over here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I didn't know if it was only sharing like half screen or not. But anyways, so in here I've got a pod.yaml. I just created it and let's just cat that. Oops. It's just exactly what's in the lesson right here. So everything's the same. We're just creating a pod. So anyways, to apply this pod, we can just do kubectl, which is like it's a common CLI that's used with Kubernetes to like interface with your Kubernetes cluster. So anyways, so the command for this is Kubernetes apply dash F, which is stands for like file. And then you just call out the file name or the file path that you specify. So in this, I'm just doing pod.yaml and hit enter. And as you can see, it says pods created. And so if I wanted to go and list the pods, I would just do a kubectl get pods. And I have one pod running. Okay. And the name is pods. Is that what I named it? Pods? I guess I could have chose a better name. But anyways, this one's called pods. But say I wanted to grab it by its label of app web, then I would run this command. And we'll just go over here in a second. So kubectl get pods, right? Just like the same. And the dash L stands for like label. And so you can just pass in the label app web, right? You have the key, you have the value, and then you could separate it and have like multiple labels, right? So the environment is also a label, right? You have two labels here. You have the app web and the environment production. And so right here, we're just calling both. You don't have to call both. You can call one or the other, and that would work just fine. However, in this use case, we'll just be calling both, and it also just grabs a pod. So yeah, it'll just grab whatever pods have that matching label versus the kubectl get pods will list all the pods within that namespace anyway, if you specify a namespace. Cool. So use cases, labels and selectors often or offer great flexibility in managing and interacting with Kubernetes resources. Some use cases are spec file. You can match labels. So you can have spec files with different labels. Right, like if you have two containers and you want to specify like the same label and kind of group them together and to do whatever, you can do that. I don't know, you could have, a bunch of pods or a bunch of nodes or a bunch of deployments or, whatever. And you just kind of want to logically, match them. Apps, oh, I'm sorry, labels are a great way of doing such. Cool. Yeah, so organizing, so the use case is organizing resources. Use labels to group and categorize resources based on the characteristics such as environment, app version, or team ownership. That's a important one, team ownership. Sometimes you may not want a different team touching your pods if you're working within the same cluster. We definitely do that here at Oracle at my full-time job. Yep. Targeting resources, leverage selectors to target specific resources for operations such as scaling, networking, and monitoring. Blue-green deployments, use label selectors to switch traffic between different versions of your application for controlled deployments and rollbacks. Do you guys know what blue-green deployments are?
No.
Blue-green deployments is pretty much you're having like two parallel releases going at the same time. The reason being is because what if you're doing an update on one and yet you have another deployment going? You don't want them to like mess up. And so it's just to keep one updated or like one to update, one to keep going, and then it'll switch off. So that's kind of what blue-green deployments are in like a nutshell. Yep, so that's pretty much it for labels. It's not too deep of a topic to get into on that. Yeah, so let's go over to deployments. So this gets pretty fun with Kubernetes. So Kubernetes deployments managing using CLI. And this lesson provides a quick introduction into Kubernetes deployments using a series of commands. You'll learn how to create, manage, and interact with deployments and pods in Kubernetes. We will be learning to use manifest file as well after this. A manifest file is literally just like the YAML file, just kind of a fancy way of saying it. But yeah, so I mean, this goes for like all Kubernetes. You can either like apply a file like we did right here to create said resources, or you can just like create it versus like using like a kubectl create pod and then give it a name. I don't know, my pod, and then just do image equals nginx this to whatever. Sorry if you hear my dogs barking in the background. Yeah, let me know if that gets too bad and I'll put them outside. They're kind of wild. Anyway, so yeah, you can either do it via command line using kubectl like a CLI like kubectl, or you can do it in YAML form. But typically you'll be using YAML format. It's just the most accurate and kind of best way to go about it. You know, kind of like infrastructure is script, right? Anyways, so deployments. Yeah, as you can see, a deployment you could have is kind of where you would specify where like your replica sets would be. Deployments you would specify like your pods and stuff like that, and you would want to say like it has a replica set of 3, which means it has like 3 clones of itself, right? So in case like one pod goes down, you still have like 2 other duplicates that are ready to take it back up. That's kind of the glory of Kubernetes, is that if one does go down, then you have backups that'll immediately replace it, and it'll do that automatically. And so your application gets a lot more well, one, scalable and dependable. So you have a higher uptime, which is great. So anyway, so to create a deployment just via command line, you would just do a kubectl create deployment, and then you would just name it. So you could do whatever. So in this example, we'll do nginx dash deployment, and then you specify the image for the deployment, or for the pods that are going to be on it. And then just do dash dash image equals nginx, and then that'll just take like the latest one. Cool. And so if we wanted to go fetch that, we would just go do kubectl get deployment. And as you can see, we have our nginx deployment right here. If we wanted to go look at it, we would just do a kubectl describe deployment, deployment, and then just specify the name nginx dash deployment. And then it would give you like all your default configs for it. Like if you just do it in the command line, it has a bunch of defaults for it, right? We have replicas, just one desired. Obviously we can change that if we wanted to. If we wanted to change that, we would just do kubectl edit deployment, and then the name of what do we call it? Nginx dash deployment. And then it opens up like a command line, and we can edit whatever we want, right? Just like working in like a normal terminal. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So if we wanted to check the pods on that, we just do a kubectl get pods. And you can see we have an nginx deployment, and then it gives it like, so it's just like the name of the deployment, and then it just makes up some random ID for the pods that are running in the deployment. So yep, we currently have 2 pods, right? One from our pod.yaml, and then another one from our nginx deployment. Cool. And then we can also just do replica set. we're only going to have one because we only have a replica set in deployments. So we can just do kubectl get replica set, and it'll show the name of the deployment. And then a replica set, we only want one, right? We could obviously change that if you want it like 3, then we would have 3. So yeah, if we actually just, let's actually go do that. Let's just go ahead and go edit our deployment. And we'll change our replica count to 3. Okay, that is now saved, and let's just redeploy that. So kubectl, let's see, apply. Actually, do I have a deployment.yaml? I do have a deployment.yaml. So let's just go cat that real quick and see what's in there. So replica 1. So let's just go change that real quick. Deployment.yaml. And then we can change this replica to 3. And then I would just apply that. So I could just do a kubectl apply -f and then deployment.yaml. Great. And now we can just do a kubectl get pods, and we should see our replicas in that. Oops. There we go. Cool. Yeah. And then get pods, get replica set. Cool. You can also check the logs of a pod. Pods automatically kind of like store their logs. So if we wanted to just go check the logs of this pod, we would just actually, let's pick this one since it's got like a more unique kind of a name versus pod. We could just do a kubectl logs and then the pod name. Oh, well, I guess there's no logs because we haven't done anything on the pod yet, which kind of makes sense. But we could also just describe the pod if we wanted to see the details of it. So we could do like a kubectl describe pod, and then we would just give it the name of the pod, and it'll give us like all this good data on it. We could see like our image. We could see there is some logging down here. It just kind of says like created, and I don't know if you do any kind of updates or like change like the Kubernetes version on it or something like that, then it'll show up right here in the events section, which is kind of like logs. Well, it is logs, just stored in like a different place. You can see volumes on it, all sorts of good stuff. Yeah, so the describe is a really good like CLI or like kubectl CLI command that you can give. You could also exec into a pod. You know how you could exec into a container? You could do the exact same thing with pods. So let's just go ahead and show you that. So we'll just do it's pretty much the same thing or same format as you would with like execing into a container or logging into a container, however you want to say it. But you're just adding kubectl to the front of it and then the pod name. So we'll just do exec -it and then our pod name and -- bin / bash to open up a bash shell. We actually, did that not work? Oh, I did -t. That's why I need to do -it. Cool. And as you can see in the terminal, it has opened up a bash shell for that is inner pod. So we actually do an ls. It's got some like default stuff that are based on the image that you provide to create the pod. I believe this is using a Nginx latest image. So this is just what you'll see for the Nginx image. Cool. So we can also, if you wanted to see your deployments, well, let's actually just exit out of here real quick. It's the same way you would interact with like a container. You would just exit out of it to get back to like your regular shell terminal. But you know, you can pretty much do kubectl get and get whatever. You could do like kubectl get nodes. Okay. Oh, that's why nodes. This is like the default running minikube, and that's all I have. I haven't created a node. You do kubectl get deployments, and I've got 2 deployments going. Remember, I did one via the command line and one via like actually like a deployment.yaml, which is like the manifest file. So yeah. And if you do like kubectl get replica sets, I should have 2. Yep. And as you can see, I edited one via the command line, which I think was this one. And then I edited the other one via like YAML file, which is this one. So 2 deployments and 6 different pods, and I guess 7 total since I did the one with like the pod.yaml. So kubectl get pods. And then those are my pods. Cool. Let's see. Okay, so I already went over this. You can also delete pods. So if I wanted to delete this pod, I would just do kubectl delete pod and then the pod name. And then it says pod deleted. And so we can verify that by doing a kubectl get pods to list all the pods. And as you can see, our pod is destroyed. So pretty cool. This is just like basic Kubernetes. We're just kind of getting into it, the different resource types. But yeah, did I go too fast over that, or do you guys have any questions on pods and deployments?
Generally get it.
Cool. I see a thumbs up from Float. Jeremy, did you say I went too fast, or
I said it. I said I get it generally.
Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah, let's I think I kind of might have already went over this with the deployment file. I kind of already did that, kind of skipped ahead without doing it. But yeah, so we can actually just go through it. So it's the same like YAML kind of structure as like a pod as we went over in that first little pod lesson. But the kind changes to deployment. And so yes, that does matter. You're gonna have like kind of node or kind of deployment or kind of pod. And then you'll have your metadata. You're just naming it my nginx, right? Like that's what's showing up over here. So kubectl get deployments. As you can see, my nginx. So that's what shows in the metadata. And then the spec sector is what is like all the good stuff that you want in it, right? We have our containers, we have our replicas, we have labels of my nginx. Yeah, cool. And so, I mean, we're able to query that if we want, right? We can do like the kubectl get deployments dash L, and then what do we call it? Run dash nginx. Whoop, bad request, unable to find that. Did I do that wrong? Oh, what was it? Maybe it's not a colon. What was that? Let's go back to the first one and check. That's what it was. Equal sign, it's not a colon. So let's go back to it and cool. So we can do. Oh, I actually spelled it wrong too. Run my and then equal signs my nginx. In default namespace. What? kubectl get deployments my nginx, and I guess we can cat our deployment file and find out what that label is. Run my nginx. Did I not spell it right? Run my dash nginx. Oh, in default namespace. Well, I'm not sure why that's not coming up. Maybe I'm doing something wrong there. But anyways, you can query them with the dash L for labels. And then typically you would just pass in what label you have. Let's see. Yep, so we went over how you apply a file. You would just do the dash F. We kind of already did that with our deployment.yaml. So I'm not going to run it again since we already have it. And then if you wanted to see the rollout status, you could absolutely do that. We could actually just copy this. And what you do is just kubectl rollout status, deployment, and then you could either do a splash or you could like space it out. Either is fine. kubectl will recognize both. is successfully rolled out, right? In case you have like a failed deployment, it's not going to tell you. So it's the rollout command is, or rollout status command is a good way to see if it was successful or not. The describe, you could do describe on any kind of Kubernetes resource, pod, node, deployment. So that's totally fine. You can actually just get deployments right here, and then we can just describe one. So we'll describe this one, Nginx deployment. So kubectl, describe deployment, and then pass the name of the deployment. And we can have, shows all our good stuff, even some events where it says scaled up replica set. Remember when we changed it? So we can see that scaled from 1 to 3. And so it just kind of keeps like a running log in the events. So that's pretty cool. And to see the replica sets, you could just do, here's kind of like a shorthand. It's just like RS. So you could either like spell out replica sets, or you could also just do like RS. And that does the same thing. So get RS for replica sets, and it shows our 2 replica sets that we have from our 2 deployments. You guys, we already went over get pod, right? It just shows all our pods. And then if you do change your file or whatever, then you would just like apply it again, right? So if I did a VI on my deployment.yaml and wanted to change that to like from like 3 to 1, let's just go ahead and do that. 3, 2, 1, right? So it's 1 now, and then I'll just exit and save that. And then so it doesn't actually take effect yet. So if I just do replica sets, it'll still show 3. But if I do kubectl apply -f deployment.yaml, and so to like redeploy it, and so I'll only have 1. So if I just do get replica sets, now you can see it updated to 1. So pretty cool stuff. Kubernetes is pretty fun to work with. You can also see like the rollout history of the deployments, which is pretty cool. You can see like what revision you've done, or well, let's actually do the other one, Nginx deployment. What do we call the other one? My Nginx, I think. Nginx and revision 1. So we could actually see the rollout history, or you could specify each version of it if you want by just doing version 2. I don't believe we have a version 2, so it's probably wouldn't find one. So we'll just go to version 1. Kind of like labels, you can find it by labels, or you can find it by revisions for deployments, and then it just gives you just the stuff for it. Or you could also just describe the deployment that you want, and that's fine too. But if you wanted to use the CLI, remember how we just changed the deployment.yaml and updated the replica set via the YAML file? You could do the same thing with just using the CLI. You just specify with like a -- so like your Nginx name, and then just change like the replica to 5. So we could actually just do a kubectl scale. Scale is like a keyword with kubectl, right? You want to like scale the replica set is pretty much what it applies to. So we want to scale a deployment, and the deployment name is what was it? My Nginx. And then we want to tell it what we want to scale, which is the replicas equal 5, right? I believe it was at 1. So now we scale to 5. So if we just do a kubectl get replica set, then we can see it's changed to 5. So a little quick hand way of doing that. And it's pretty cool. Let's see what else is there. You can change the image of it if you want to. So you can set the image, deployment, dep name. This one has Dojo Jump 2. I'm not gonna do that one, but you guys can kind of get the point. Is there any questions on deployments, pods, or really anything that we've kind of covered so far?
Nope.
Awesome. Cool. We're just kind of crawling into Kubernetes, but it's good to know the kind of resources and how to interact with them, whether just getting it or describing it or updating it via the command line or, doing it via YAML file, which is, probably the preferred method that you should be doing. I know in any kind of production environment, you will be using infrastructure as code or like YAML file. Like everything should be managed via code. The less manual intervention that you have with an application or product, the better it's going to be. There's always going to be like user errors and human errors that come along. So it's just good to keep a track of everything. It's just way more manageable. Yeah, so that's it for today's lesson.